Representative Belinsky. Good morning.
Good morning, Madam Chair. Good morning, Sue.
Good morning.
Good morning, Representative France.
Good morning.
It's Friday. It's Friday.
All right, Madam Chair, we are ready.
Great, thank you. Okay, good morning, everybody. Sorry, I'm turning down my other Zoom. I want to welcome everybody to Human Services Agency meeting today, and I am so glad it's Friday. I can't even begin to tell you in so many ways. So what I would like to do first, before I get into discussing our first agency, which is Department of Children and Families, I'd like to ask, Representative France, would you like to say anything this morning?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate the opportunity. Looking forward to the discussion with the Human Services. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Kushner, would you like to say anything this morning?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I just look forward to the presentation, and I'm happy to see the commissioner here. She came out of the Danbury office and we've met when she toured, and it's good to see you here today. And the people in Danbury say great things about you.
Thank you. Thank you, ma'am. And yes, we hear great things about the commissioner from DCF. So good morning, Commissioner. What we usually do is we ask the commissioner to introduce their team so that we can see the people, and ask them if they can turn their cameras on so we can just see them for a moment, even if they want to turn them off and be shy. But just so that we know, because a lot of us talk to them on the phone, and it really makes us feel somewhat better this way, because we're not in 2C, so we could see all of them. So good morning, and go right ahead, ma'am.
Good morning. Good morning. Good morning to the chairs, to Senator Austin, Representative Walker, Senator Minor, Representative France, and all of the distinguished members of the Appropriations Committee. My name is Vanessa Durantes, and I'm the Commissioner of the Connecticut Department of Children and Families. You have our written testimony, and while I am humbled by the comments directed towards me, they are shared with this tremendous team of leaders that I have here with me. My co-pilot for today is our Chief Fiscal Officer, Cindy Butterfield. And so she will be primarily answering most of the questions that you have. But with us, we also have subject matter experts in various parts of the agency. I truly believe that their active participation in this process increases their proficiency and fiscal acumen as stewards of the taxpayer dollar. So you will see them and hear who they are. But Cindy and I will be kind of air traffic control and asking for their participation where appropriate. They are indeed subject matter experts, and they can help you make informed decisions on any of the questions you have on the DCF budget. So along with Chief Fiscal Officer Butterfield, I have my two deputy commissioners who I consider my right and left arms, Michael Williams and Jody Hill-Lilly. Michael Williams is over the operations arm of DCF, and Jody Hill-Lilly on the administrative side. One is the bones and the other is the body. The Assistant Chief Fiscal Officer is Melanie Sparks. I also have three bureau chiefs with me. The Bureau Chief of External Affairs is Ken Meisegland. The Bureau Chief of Child Welfare is Tina Jefferson. Our data person and Bureau Chief of Strategic Planning is Trina Mazzata. We have two senior administrators that are over the support, the service array. One is our clinical and community and consultation supports, Joshonda Garrier, and then the administrator for transitional supports and success. You may have recalled that that division used to be called adolescent services, but it's so much more than that. So our senior administrator of transitional supports and success is Dr. Linda Dixon. The two superintendents of Solnit North and South, and I know that we will be talking very closely about, or there were some previously directed comments by the public related to the Solnits, and sometimes you hear just the word Solnit, but what you'll hear today is the distinction between the two campuses and the three distinct services, the service types that are there. The two superintendents are Dr. Brett Rayford, the superintendent of Solnet North, which is our PRTF for boys, and the superintendent of Solnet South, Dr. Frank Gregory, which is our PRTF for girls, along with our hospital, Children's Psychiatric Hospital. Next, we have our Assistant Legal Director, Kate Dwyer, who has been our consultant on everything legislative and works hand in hand with yours truly, Vinnie Russo, who you all know as our legislative liaison. And so that is the team that I have here with me. They will be muted, and like I indicated, Cindy and I will kind of punt to either to any of them if there are is there information that you'd like to hear from them in their respective fields.
Awesome. Thank you. And welcome DCF staff. And it's always a pleasure to listen to what's going on with the Department of Children and Families, and also have an opportunity to talk about the budget and also policies that are evolving out of the agency new. And I want to welcome you, Commissioner. Is this your first real we had one last year, didn't we?
That's right.
Okay,
Yes.
so this is your second one.
It
Okay.
is my second.
Yeah. Okay, you're a pro at this now. Okay, no problem. I'm going to jump right in, and I'm glad you opened up with that. Yes, we had the president of Hartford Health, who mentioned in her testimony, and can I just say it was very interesting to have the public testify before we got to the agencies, and I think, Sue, that was brilliant, and I think we should do that more because it helps us to direct things from the budget and from policy, and sort of look through them so that we can talk to the agency directly about them right away. So with that, she mentioned the concern about the closure of the 8 to 10 psychiatric beds in I think in the PRTF.
Yes.
Area, and she also mentioned Solnet, the Solnet campus north, in her testimonies. So for our purposes, for budget purposes, but also for policy, to understand what's going on, could you have them explain what the issue is about the PRTF, and then explain, because it is a reduction in the budget, and what does that do to you?
So, Madam Chair, thank you very much. And we agree that having the public testimony ahead of ours allows us to organize our thinking around how we can present information to inform the committee on the department's decisions here. So I would ask that CFO Butterfield start with the fiscal piece of things, and then I will ask Dr. Rayford to offer the contextual information to support that. Okay,
great. Go ahead. Good morning, Cindy. Good to see you.
Good to see you too. Thank you for this opportunity. Yes, so what we're looking to do is we right now have 4 different units at Solnet North. They're 3 units of 10 and 1 unit of 8. What we have proposed is closing one of those units, because the more you have residents spread out across the campus, the higher the staffing level needs to be. And when we have looked at the historical need for beds at Solnet North, we have not gone over 30 beds since it opened, and we had 38 beds. So it was 3 units of 10, 1 unit of 8. So we made the determination that we could consolidate down to 3 beds. And the superintendent has come up with a plan to expand vocational education and all kinds of other opportunities there. So really what we're doing is reducing the bed count to meet what the census is, and still will be over the census if there's any growth. This resulted in the reduction of 8 full-time positions and 1 part-time position, which we believe we can meet through attrition. There will not be an issue with that. And we'll still adequately meet the needs of the population that is normally referred to that site.
Okay. Dr. Rayford? There you go.
Hi, representatives. So give you just a little bit of historical context. Solnet North has been a psychiatric residential treatment facility since 2013. In that period of time, the average census has been 27 boys on average. There have been a couple of years when the census was 30 as an average, and other times at 25 and 20 over the course of a year. So we've never used all of that bed space. One of the things that we want to do with Willow Cottage, and this is a cottage that we're talking about closing, is to create a really dynamic vocational experience. We have a very strong clinical team here. We have a very strong residential staff. As an example, our residential staff, we have more than 1,100 years of childcare experience in that group of paraprofessionals. We have over 400 years of clinical experience with our clinicians, our psychiatrists, psychologists, and medical staff. Our educational staff, we have nearly 150 years of educational experience, and so we've got a really nice holding environment. Our leg on the stool for clinical is exceptionally strong. Our leg on the stool around education is strong. We have young men developing their academic trajectories, getting balanced when they've come in with deficits. But our leg on the stool around vocational treatment, while sturdy, could be a lot more robust. And so by using Willow Cottage to develop this vocational experience for young men, an example is we have a maple syrup tapping youth business, for example. So we have our young men, if you came on campus now, you would see 20 trees tapped with maple syrup in production. We have a car detailing business. We go out to the soup kitchen, local soup kitchen, and teach our boys how to volunteer. Part of that focus is to help them develop a moral structure. We go to the veterinary hospital, so kids have exposure to animals. We have a ton of ideas that we can then expand if we have this space that we're not using or don't need for bed space.
Okay, I'm gonna jump in. So the concern I gather from the president was the fact that we were reducing beds. And you're sure that the reduction of the 8 beds at Solent North. Now, Solent North is all boys?
Solent North is all boys. It's also what we call a subacute unit.
Yeah.
And so I know that there's been some confusion about whether we're an inpatient hospital.
Mm-hmm.
We are not. We are a PRTF. So an inpatient setting.
What's a PRTF, sir, please?
So the PRTF is a psychiatric residential treatment facility. So it's considered subacute. As an example, the doors are not locked. The campus looks like, if you were to walk on campus, it's sort of a horseshoe with 4 cottages, a swimming pool in the middle, a school. It actually is, you have to come and visit. We open that up post-COVID for you guys to come and take a look at what we're doing. So a young man could leave the cottage, right, and walk across campus to the school. So it's a little different than an inpatient setting where the doors are locked and kids are confined. So kids don't come directly from an emergency department to Solent North as a rule. An exception, they do. We've probably had 10 referrals over the past year from EDs. We took 8 of those boys. 2 were not appropriate. One of the things that is a admission criteria for Solent North is that your cognitive abilities have to be able to absorb all the things that are happening in this sort of fast-paced environment. So one of the referrals was for a kid with a cognitive ability of 42, and we require a cognitive ability at 70. And so sometimes it's just an inappropriate referral, right? They wouldn't be able to absorb everything that we have to offer.
Okay, so before you go on, because I'm trying to keep it, so this is all boys. Is it possible that the president was referring to the girls? Is access to the girls? Is there a backup for the girls PRTFs at Solent South?
Representative, I might be able to clarify also what some of the concern might be. According to Beacon Health Options, which is the administrative services organization that manages the flow of children through the system, there are 49 children that are considered kind of backed up. When you hear the term backed up in EDs, one of those is on target or on the wait list for Solent North. So the reason why I made the distinction that we have the PRTF for girls, the PRTF for boys, and the inpatient setting down at Solnet South is because when you hear Solnet North and the budget line item to reduce 8 beds there, it doesn't necessarily have the impact of the 49 children that we see in the EDs that are awaiting inpatient level of care. Even, of the children that we have in DCF custody right now, 7 of them are in out-of-state placements. And those out-of-state placements are those specialized needs, younger children requiring hospital level care that we don't have here. And some of those like really special like eating disorders or significant problem sexual behavior that they need a specialized setting for. So I would guess that the 49 children wouldn't meet the criteria for the PRTF level of care. But Dr. Gregory is here from Solnet South if you'd like a couple of specific answers on that.
Well, what I just want to make sure, the main thing that I'm trying to find out is that by the reduction of the beds, this doesn't add to a wait list. It still addresses the needs that are out there. But then I do know that there was concern, and I may have misheard the concern. It may not have been to Solnet North as much as it was for Solnet South. And is there a waiting list for Solnet South? And one other thing, I also was told that there's an IQ level that is a minimal amount that is accessible to these facilities. If they have lower than whatever IQ level they have, what is this? What is the margin for the IQ level that you can take in Solnet North or South?
So for Solnet North, the IQ is 70, though we will take boys with an IQ of 60, mid 60s up to 70. And part of the challenge with a kid with a lower IQ than that is that there's so much happening in a fast-paced PRTF where kids are having to move to the school, move into rehab services, 3 shifts of staff. And so we've discovered when we take kids at a much lower IQ than that they just can't digest everything that's happening.
All right, I've gone over my question marks because I know I'm probably going to be yelled at and people are going to jump right in, but I'm going to come back to it probably if we don't unpack it a little bit more. But the main thing was the access that is really what concerns us, so that we are not reducing that. And mental health obviously is something that we have to expand on, and in multiple levels. So I'm going to come back to that afterwards. Senator Kushner, do you have any questions?
Not at this time. Thank you, Representative Walker.
Thank you. Representative France.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just have one question in the policy revision related to quality parenting centers. And you look at it, it seems like a substantial decrease in funding to support that, as well as positions, and how a transition to a new model will provide equivalent care or improved care with the reductions that are shown in the budget.
Thank you so much for that question, because we are very excited to talk about this proposal, because we believe that it positions us to the ability to repurpose. And our CFO will talk to you and explain the line items and where the figures come from. But I'm happy to talk about just the thought process and innovation about being able to provide this type of model for parents and children to have quality time with each other. One of the things to tease that part of the conversation up is that I want to try to start to eliminate the word visitation between parents and their children. I don't believe parents visit with their children. They have quality parenting time with them, and this is a model that starts to move us in that direction. However, I'd like you to hear the budget implications for this quality parenting center model to be able to understand what's behind this suggestion.
Hi, thank you, Commissioner. The option has a lot of moving parts to it, so I do find that folks start to get a little confused when they see us moving from one account to another and how we're doing that. Primarily supervised visitation is a very time-intensive practice. And that usually requires that we gather everyone together in one location. The visit takes about 90 minutes for it to be done. And then we have to get everybody back to their home location. A lot of times parents need transportation, and children always need transportation. So, you know, a visit for 90 minutes can take up to 4 hours of somebody's time to actually accomplish and arrange. So we did a time study on what our workers were doing that they wouldn't necessarily need to do, that could be done by somebody else. And we came up with a calculation that for every case that a worker has on their caseload, they spend 140 minutes doing supervised visitation activities. On top of that, then we also have, you know, private providers, a private provider workforce, credentialed services. We spend about $3 to $4 million a year on them providing supervised visitation. And we end up with this very big kind of bucket of money. The other piece of it is generally supervised visitation happens after hours. And what I mean is after school days and after work days. This is when folks can normally get together and do this, and on Saturdays and Sundays. So this would be a driver of all kinds of other ancillary expenses. So what we hope to achieve by doing this was to be able to consolidate this work into an area and reduce time spent on this activity that could be done by a private provider workforce, probably better, and certainly the locations that it would be done in would be better. Right now, they take part in the visits in area offices, which are not home-like or natural in that way, or, you know, in more public places like McDonald's or shopping malls or things like that. This would give an opportunity for a family to have a visit in a home-like setting that is a little bit more private, and they can act more naturally. So what the budget option does is we see a reduction of approximately 50 positions, and that is that heavy workload that we talk about. This would also expand the opportunity to have more visits. We also see the fee-for-service, credentialed servicing of supervised visitation reducing 1.6 million in the first year and 2.4 million in the second year out of that 3 or 4 million we spend each year. And then what we propose to do is to use our current unused capacity that has been unused for several years now in our congregate care grant-funded homes. So we have a variety of these group homes, and we also have SFITs. And what we're going to do is run an RFP, ask providers to apply for that RFP, and then go through a regular process to determine what would be the best location and who might be interested in providing this new level of care. What we're proposing is moving dollar for dollar from our short-term board and care residential account into our foster care account, because this will be supporting foster children. So we are not decreasing the amount of funding to the providers that step up and are interested in this new model. We're going to move the funding over and then convert their current homes into the quality parenting centers and retool them for this kind of care. The reduction that you see in the amount of money coming over from residential to foster care is a reduction in supervised visitation, private provider service. It is not a reduction in the amount of funding to the grant-funded private providers.
Thank you for that. And you've mentioned model several times. Are there other states that have used this model? And if so, what did we do to adapt there based on scale or their unique situation here or there to make this be a successful implementation here?
So there are several different ways that jurisdictions have tackled quality parenting time. Some of them are family resource centers within communities that do a wide range of things. We had to be innovative and organic in the capacity in our group homes and think about what we could do. I wanted to resist shutting down these facilities because of underutilization, and thought really long and hard about how to partner with our provider community to use that excess capacity in a way that I think can benefit families. They have the expertise in their clinical acumen in these facilities already. They're not full. Some of them are. You heard some testimony from some of our congregate care providers of the number of children that they've served. But when you look at the totality of our grant-funded therapeutic group homes, as well as our SFITs, which is another type of setting for children, they are at about 40 to 50% capacity. So we think by repurposing them in this way, it affords quality interaction between parents and children. It has the fiscal reduction, but then it also allows for the providers to remain whole.
Very good. Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you for the question, Representative.
Thank you. Representative Abercrombie.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, Commissioner. It's so
Good
nice to
morning.
see you again.
Nice to see you too.
And nice to see your team here. So I'd like to follow the line of questioning with Representative France. I'm not opposed to this concept, but I'm a little confused by it. And let me tell you why. I have a lot of friends that are foster parents, so I know how this process works a little bit. So the way that you're describing this is that we are going to take some of the residential group homes and repurpose them for these families to do visits, right? Is my understanding. How many group homes do you think at this point, because I know you're going to do an RFP, but how many out there do you think are in a position to be able to take those facilities and repurpose them?
So I'd like to ask Dr. Linda Dixon to talk about which of those facilities you think might be appropriate for something like this.
Good morning, committee members. Thank you for having me here today. I think in the quality parenting centers, we currently have a group working on this with the Child Welfare Bureau, and we are not limiting it to one service type. I think we want to make sure that the location is right, accessibility is right, and that there's good space on site. If we're just looking at the therapeutic group homes, there are 26 grant funded homes. I would guess we're going to get a lot of competition. At least 15 homes would possibly express some interest, but some of our nonprofits have multiple sites, and they might want to consider an alternative site because they might have a small kitchenette that would allow families to cook meals. They might have more space, might be more accessible to a bus line. So we want to be as open and flexible as possible.
So if I could follow along that thought pattern, you talk about a reduction in staff because of overtime and perhaps transportation. I understand the transportation piece of it because currently a lot of families have to find a central location to be able to visit, to be able to have mom and dad visit with the child, right? So they're using libraries, and I agree with you, Commissioner. They're not really the best settings for families to go. But my question is, so if you're taking a residential group home and you're turning it into one of these settings, you still need staff there because they still should be. My understanding, one of the problems we have with the foster care system right now is that you really should be having a social worker there that is helping to work the family with the child, especially children that are removed as infants. There's no relationship between them, and it makes it very difficult. And I have friends that are social workers that are foster parents, and they said that's a big gap in the system. So I don't see the reduction in the staff really being the numbers that you're projecting here. I think you have an opportunity when we're talking about reunification to do it in a more efficient way. So I have some concerns about that piece of it. The transportation, yes, I think that if you have more locations, right, families have the opportunity to get together. I think your timeline is a little off because I believe that the timeline's the same. You're not taking even infants. Their foster parents are working. So you're not doing visitation during the day. You're hopefully doing it at night where they can do dinner. You're absolutely right. But most of it currently is done on the weekends. And push and then add the part where you have foster families who I have Johnny, but I know the other foster family that has Cindy, right? And they try to join those families together. So you still have some of those costs. I'm not.
Representative, can I just clarify one thing? And I think it might make this, it may be extremely illuminating for this one particular issue. The staffing numbers that are included in this are our staff that would be conducting the transportation, the supervision of the visits, and the clinical parenting kind of modeling that would occur would be the staff of the facility who would be there and would help to negotiate, monitor, coach through the visit. The after hours would be the money that we would be spending on our staff doing the after hours. But right now, these group homes have 3 shifts that are around the clock. We would propose that the savings comes in the fact that the 2 shifts that they would be working are what are already accounted for there. So they already have staff that work in those second shift type hours that we just talked about. So the overtime reduction and the staffing reduction are actually the costs associated with our staff completing those tasks, where these quality parenting centers, that would be included in the RFP for their staff to be doing that. And I believe that some of their staff in these settings are more equipped to provide what you're describing as the foster parents' concern about who will be kind of helping to navigate these interactions when they happen, because they're clinically trained. You know, the fact that they are the staff of the therapeutic group homes and that they would be there to do that will help kind of navigate those visits. And then instead of having 3 shifts, they have 2 shifts, so they can accommodate those nights and weekends. So I apologize if we weren't clear that that reduction was not in the actual people conducting the visits, but it would be in the time study that Cindy referenced related to like our social worker case aides and those people who do the transports right now. And we believe that we can absorb a lot of that through attrition over the next couple of years, but it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. But that's what the thinking is behind that. So I didn't want to leave that point of confusion unexplained.
That's great. Thank you so much. And that does help with some of the confusion. When you talk about the reduction of the 50 positions, so if it's not through attrition, then those individuals will probably go back to that. They won't be overtime anymore, but they'll still have those positions. So what is the current caseload of our caseworkers right now?
So most of those on the that 50 are usually are social worker case aides and not necessarily caseload carrying, but Cindy has done the numbers on that. So Cindy, can you answer the representative's question on the current caseload and what factored into the number that you included in the quality parenting centers?
As of last payroll, the caseload was at 66.4% of a full caseload. So the caseload is down. We have had reduced numbers. This is a melded number between social workers and case aides through the attritional 50. The majority of it would be case aides. And we're looking at, obviously everyone's looking at the retirements that are coming up and how we might be able to work around this. And we saw this probably would be an opportunity at this point to be able to do that. We do have quite a few case aide positions open right now. So we should be able to accomplish this.
Thank you very much. Madam Chair, are we 2 questions only?
Right now, we are 2 questions because we
Okay,
do
no,
have
that's fine. I just want to make sure I'm on the same page because you know
Okay.
I could go on forever. So just going to Solnit for a moment, right? I would like you to consider, instead of closing one of the units, being more of a step down unit. And I'm not sure if we can do it, if we can blend these funding systems, but we have a lot of youth, especially men, young men, boys, they're boys, in that age group that are stuck in the ER. And some of these, and a lot of them I will say, are under the 70 IQ. And I know that you're saying that that's not the intent of that unit, but I think we have an opportunity here because we already have the infrastructure to help some of these individuals. And a lot of these kids, I will say it, these are men, young men that are on the autism spectrum, but they're out of, their parents can no longer control them and they're stuck in the ER and we have no place for them to go. DDS has started some step down units. But this might be an opportunity because we already have the infrastructure to help that population. So I would like you to think about that, consider it, you know, as we have these conversations going forward. What is the length of time that an average individual stays in Solnit?
Dr. Rayford or Dr. Gregory, length of stay?
So for Sonnet North, the average treatment episode is 120 days. We do have some young men who come in and the treatment, they reach their treatment goals before 120 days. And then we have some young men who stay longer than that, but that's the average.
And Solnit South would be similar.
Okay. And this is full state funding? This isn't any Medicaid dollars or anything like that?
Cindy?
Yes. We do get Medicaid reimbursement for stays at Solnit North and South. They are either inpatient hospital or residential treatment facility. Between the two campuses, they bring to the state approximately $40 million in Medicaid reimbursement.
But the 40 million is across other programs also, right? It's not 40 million, or is it 40 million just for the two residentials, the PRT?
The inpatient hospital for Solnit North and South, and the PRTF at Solnit North and South, the inpatient at Solnit South. Yes, that's the reimbursement. Yes.
40 million we get from the Medicaid.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
We do fund it through the DCF budget, but and we also get private insurance too.
Yeah, see, you've got a really opportunity here to grow this, guys. We have such a need in this state. So I'm not gonna, you know, belabor the question, but I would love to have an offline conversation about this. Thank you, Madam Chair, and I would like to be included in round 2.
Thank you, Representative. Next, we have Representative Gilchrist.
Hi, trying a new device. Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you, Commissioner. I'm covering it. So good to see you today and your team. My questions, please feel free to follow up if you don't have answers today, but my questions surround around the population of folks, of children that you work with who are experiencing domestic minor sex trafficking, or who it's believed to be experiencing domestic minor sex trafficking. And it's my understanding that this is a very high risk, high need population. They often tend to run from group homes, and if placed together, can unfortunately entice one another to get back out in the life, is the best way I can explain it. So I'm wondering, where are these youth currently placed? Are they majority at residential group homes? Are they majority in therapeutic foster homes? And is there any need for additional funding? I don't see it in the budget proposal, but that's where I'm going with this. Is there any additional need that we could be supportive of?
Thank you, Representative Gilchrist, and good to see you as well. I will ask, let's see, our senior administrator over the clinical and community support, Shoshanda Garrier, because the domestic minor sex trafficking or heart work is under her purview. I will say that historically, the school of thought, and you know, because you've been in, you know, really supporting this particular cohort for quite some time, kind of goes back and forth between whether or not group care is the appropriate place, or foster homes that are specifically trained. And I do believe that at one point we had a specific training curriculum around preparing foster families to be able to take children who had been victims of DMST. I also recognize that it was hard to kind of keep those beds open in terms of being able to be available when we need it, when the children are, you know, sometimes brought back and, you know, kind of taken back from the victimization that they are involved in. So I would ask that oops, sorry about that. I lost audio for a second. I would ask Director Garrier to answer what she is currently thinking with Tammy Sneed, who is our Director of Girl Services around this particular area. Joshanda?
Hi, good morning, everyone. Thank you, Representative, for the question. Specific to your request for numbers in terms of where specifically they're placed in which venues, I would like to be able to follow up with you all to give you accurate data specific to that. But this is a population that does remain constantly on our radar. As you know, we began to also receive information around those who we believe are demonstrating characteristics of human trafficking, for us to track those in our community, to make sure that we're wrapping them with services as soon as we can. Human Family First has a component that's specific to this targeted population as well. And so as we continue to do a deeper dive to assess, there are specific placement options that we need to create for them. That is definitely on our continuum, because you are correct. Recruitment is a consideration. We know that it's hard to get our arms around these young ladies, young men, once we do have them. And so we try to be very proactive quickly to infuse them with services, resources, and information to get them into treatment sooner than later. So follow up on the numbers, but definitely a priority in our work with this population.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate it, and I look forward to the follow-up info and follow-up conversations. Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you both.
Thank you. Next, we have Representative Datham.
And Representative Walker, if you need to go, I'm here. Thank you.
Okay. I'm good for a few more minutes, okay? Thanks.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and thank you, Commissioner, for your discussion today and the advance letter that you sent our committee. I have a big ask, and it's not for today, it's for something to bring to the working group. I'd like to get an overall sort of census of the children that are supported by your organization by line item. Was wondering if I can get this for like a 3-year history. One, to talk about by program, with a brief description of program, things that both are done by state employees as well as by our not-for-profits that are helping our agency. And in there, I'd like to understand the number of children that are served by each of those programs, so that I'll be able to tie that back into the budget, and then have an understanding about how sort of the length of the program, either if it's a length of stay or a length of attention to the program. But I just really want to get an overall global census to understand how the agency works, and really understand how some of these movements might be affecting the number of children that are served. And then if there are kids that are turned away from any programs within here, if we can get an understanding why they might be turned away. So you gave some explanations earlier on the SOLNT program, but just an understanding for some of the other. So that's my first question. My second question is really to get an understanding of the individualized family supports. It looks like there's some permanent cuts that are happening there. And I'd like to get an understanding why we are having permanent cuts there, because so these are sort of wraparound services. I'm just concerned that during, if we are making permanent shortfalls that maybe we experienced it this year due to COVID, that kids don't get sort of sidelined and not able to have the attention that they need. So again, not to necessarily have today, but if you could please bring to the working group a better explanation on why, some of these wraparound services have had permanent cuts. And I might be back for another set of questions. But thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Commissioner, for your help today.
Madam Chair, may I respond just briefly to a portion of Representative Dathan's questions?
Sure.
While we will provide a more comprehensive response in the workshop, I do want to clarify, and I appreciate the opportunity to say this out loud structurally. DCF has the child protection arm, but we also are statutorily mandated on children's behavioral health. So we share the concern about making sure that the full continuum of services are available for all of Connecticut's children and the behavioral health side of our work. currently on the child protection side, although we service over 26,000 children in any calendar year, or 26,000 children in any calendar year, 3,857 of them are in DCF custody. So we can start to break that down in the working group as to, you know, what that looks like. But when we think of children's behavioral health, that's every child in Connecticut, and really thinking about what the needs are across service types, whether they are Medicaid funded, whether they are grant funded services, whether they are credentialed services that families can get through RAP funds. And it's that full continuum from the lightest touch to the most intense, deepest end. So we would be happy to talk about that full service continuum and where we see opportunity. But I would also like Cindy to talk about just the line items and what the interpretation of some of that is, because I do think a reduction in cuts are not necessarily as they seem, and she can explain what that means in fiscal terms.
Hi, thank you very much. We do actually see an expansion of individualized family supports over the 2-year period. I think in general, over the years, we have seen a reduction in the need for individualized family supports in some areas because of, as you say, RAP funding. We've moved off the DCF caseload, voluntary services, and families that do not need to be on the caseload. They're now being served on different tracks. So we have the differential response track, or FAR, early on. If a family comes to our attention and they go through an investigation but are unsubstantiated and need services, we can refer them to Beacon to also receive services through IFCS. So that has reduced our need for in DCF budget expenses for RAP services. It has actually moved to the DRS line, the differential response line. So, and we have had very good success with these 2 programs, moving them off of the DCF caseload and having them managed by a community management entity.
And if the committee recalls, this was that group of cases that during our last budget hearing, we talked about that were unsubstantiated low-risk cases that were open on DCF caseloads, that we then created this integrated family care and support outside of DCF's door that would be along that continuum of differential response that Cindy just spoke of, and that we anticipated that this would happen during the last budget biennial presentation that we had, because there was that group of cases that kind of fit that kind of middle model of why did we have the case open to connect families to services when an external entity could do that and coordinate care that way.
How are those different than the 2Gen initiative, or am I just confusing things?
So I believe that the 2Gen initiative looks at services available to parents and children, and recognizing that strengthening the parent capacity, if you will, improves the condition for the child. Our services are specific to the children. And so when you do integrated care, integrated family care and support, it is looking at the whole family. But that's just kind of a brief, kind of off the top of my head response to that. We could delve into it further in the working groups.
That's good for today, and then delving in the working group. I can see my my chair is giving me daggers now.
But thank you for the question. It allowed us to kind of really talk about the 2 arms of DCF. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think that the questioning is good, and I think it's going to take a little bit longer than the time frame that we have in order to gather that information. But I'm glad Lucy, Representative Datham is digging into all of them, and she's going to have an incredible library by the end of this session. Anyhow, I'm going to next Representative Nolan. Rep. Nolan, can you unmute yourself? There you go.
Seeing that, good morning, first of all, and thank you, Madam Chair. The YSPs have shifted over to DCF, and we, working with them as much as some of us do. I would hope that you could share, what the status is and how we can be of help to make sure that during the shift, they don't get lost in regards to the things that they're going to be doing for us coming up.
I appreciate the question, Representative Nolan, and we agree with you. As the department looks to increase our prevention services and, dare I say, diversion type of community-based types of programs, the YSBs and the associated JRBs are critical to making sure that communities have what they need to meet the needs of kids in their communities. I'd asked Dr. Dixon to talk about the work that we're doing with the YSB since they've been transitioned back over to DCF to really get our arms around what it is they need in terms of supporting the communities that they serve. Linda?
Yes, there's a lot of great work that is happening in multiple forums in the JJPOC and the IO Youth, and a lot of people talking about youth service bureaus. We got these back in 2019, and I thought I hit the jackpot just because they have such a broad mandate to impact children and families, prevention, intervention, and diversion systems. I think the next steps are those landscape analysis and the pilot, and then we can figure out from there the capacity of the system with more things being decriminalized from the courts and moving to pathways such as the YSBs. I think we're going to have a better sense of potential cost and capacity in the system.
As far as cost now, I mean, has the cost remained level? Is it something that we need to keep an eye on or make some movement in regards to making sure that they're taken care of? Because I know during shifts also, usually those agencies or programs that get shifted happen to lose a little bit of money. And we want to make sure that this is one program that is so important that I don't want to see them losing money in this manner, especially during this pandemic.
Right. Well, there's 102. And as we know, the capacity just varies in size and scope, and some provide multiple services such as counseling and positive youth development, and some have a half-time staff member based on their resources. So I'm confident that the landscape analysis and our work with the Council of State Governments will help us figure out the cost that we're going to have to infuse in the system. As more and more things do come to them from the courts, I think there will need to be some more resources. But I believe it's probably too early to give you a dollar figure or a dollar amount for the whole system. It covers 134 towns and cities.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I could ask more, but I know the rule.
Well, you can. Oh, you only asked basically one. We all stretched it a little bit, so that was one content. So you can get another question, and go ahead, Representative.
Thank you, and that would be in regards to the funding that we recognize now. If we can get sent anything on in regards to what the YSBs have incoming, and just so we can see where the monies are going and what's going on in regards to that funding for them. I think that's important to know.
Yes, we can absolutely offer that in the working session.
Thank you. Representative Gonzalez. Good morning.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning. I got a question about supervised visitation.
Yes.
I would like to know if the program that DCF has for supervised visitation, if it is almost the same at when the court orders supervised visitation.
Mm-hmm.
Is that if DCF works with a court, or what is the process here?
So thank you, Representative, and it's good to see you this morning. So when the court orders supervised visitation, it's typically for children that are in our care. So I'm talking about the children that are serviced through juvenile court. Typically, the supervision piece is offered at the beginning of the case related to whether or not there is a safety concern. And we have varying degrees of supervised visitation. As you heard, sometimes those supervised visits occur inside outside a DCF office. Sometimes they occur in other settings, but for the most part, when a court orders a supervised visit, that is usually through a DCF service.
Years ago, I was a little bit concerned about the supervised visitation ordered by the court because there were some parents they were calling. They were concerned about the person that he was there with mom, right? And it was a lot of concern. It was a lot of complaints, and I was concerned about that. So it is a way. I think it's still some of those problems out there. And I think it sounds like your plan. It sounds really good. I like that.
Thank you.
I think that I would like to see if some way, somehow, we can deal with the one, with the one that the judge orders supervised visitation, because they will, when they order supervised visitation, they direct the people to go here and there.
Mm-hmm.
They will give them specific places to go for supervised visitation. And that was my concern, because those places, they were out of control.
Mm-hmm.
So do you think that there could be a way that we can work with the court? Because I like your plan. I think that if we got people in those centers that we can rely on, and we can, hold DCF accountable for that. When in the other places it were out of control, we couldn't hold anybody, accountable for. Do you think that will be possible?
I hear your concern, and I do think that working with the courts and judicial related to, not just the parenting time, this will allow us to give better information back to the court because it's in a more natural setting, and it really does speak to empowering the parent in that situation to have better quality time with their child and being able to offer information back to the court. So I'm confident that a lot of the changes that we're trying to make will be acceptable by the court, and they will see us as a partner in really trying to make sure that we're strengthening families.
And I know that maybe 98% of the cases they go to court, when they order supervised visitation, they got to pay. The parents, they got to pay to go to those different places. What can you tell me about your program?
So this is not in those previous iterations of that. Those were outside of the DCF system. This is talking about the children that we have committed to DCF care, and that would be a part of the costs associated with where it is in the line item. Parents would not have to pay any additional money for that to happen. This is part of the ability to strengthen the family towards reunification or towards the planning of whatever the next steps are for that particular family.
Very good information. I really like that. I really like that. So thank you and have a good day.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, ma'am. Okay, so we're going to round two, and I'm going to jump in very quickly before Representative Abercrombie, because she's waiting right there, I can see. But I want to just ask and I want to thank you for your immediate answer to our JJPOC committee's request on education, and how we feel that it's important, as we looked at the education for children in custody, how it was sort of scattered in a variety of different ways. And the children, when they come into the system, if they are in Bridgeport, they're Bridgeport Detention Center, they have Bridgeport Board of Ed. If they are in Hartford, they have Hartford Board of Ed. And it needs to be balanced, because education in each of those locations are varying. And that becomes another handicap for kids in the juvenile justice system. So you all said, yes, we will take over the education component to unify it and make it more responsive for the kids' needs. Can you just talk to us a bit about that? And are there funding requirements that you think we need to put into your budget for that?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And for us, although the statutory mandate for children in the juvenile justice system is no longer with DCF, I do believe that ensuring that their needs are met and the full child well-being system is our responsibility. And so that's why it felt comfortable for DCF to step forward to coordinate those efforts. I would like Deputy Commissioner Michael Williams to talk just briefly about the work that he's doing to galvanize that particular group and respond to your funding question.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning. Good morning, Madam Chair, and to the rest of the committee. We have had an opportunity to begin acting upon the recommendations that the JJPOC has made regarding Department of Children and Families providing oversight and structure to children who are currently in out-of-home placement in juvenile justice facilities. We've put together a very dynamic and energetic group of people to be a part of this implementation team, from superintendents to advocates, and we've had our second meeting now. Our cost analysis won't occur yet because we're still in the process of trying to understand what needs to happen in order to meet the expectations that's been placed on us by the committee. And already in a couple of meetings, we've been able to unpack some of the systemic challenges that have impacted the academic achievement for kids in JJ facilities, over the past years. And those systemic challenges are real and can be fixed. And we know they can be fixed. And so we're cataloging those, and the deliverable for us is around mid-September. We will come back to the committee with the full plan and the cost and ready for implementation at that time. And we think it's going to be one that all of us in the state of Connecticut will be proud of, because we are treating this with the utmost urgency, because these are our kids who really are suffering badly due to the fact that they have been in incarcerated facilities. So that's the plan we're on. That's the timeline that we're on right now.
Okay, thank you. And thank you for that, because we've heard so many cases of kids that basically are going over and over again, same ditto sheets and things. And then they go back to their school system and absolutely have gained nothing. So I think it's time we try and put it on the same K-12 system that we have in the state. So thank you very much for that. Representative Abercrombie, I'm hoping we're talking foster parents, right?
A little bit here and a little bit there. Staying on the same line of foster parents, one of the things we heard in the testimony was delay in parents for childcare. Can you tell me in your budget how your childcare works for foster parents currently?
Thank you, Representative, for that question. And I appreciated hearing the concern that were raised by the child care providers. And before I turn it to Melanie Sparks, who will explain the distinction between children in foster care and daycare and child care payments in general, I have to say publicly that I apologize that the providers that have experienced the complexities of our system had the experiences that they had, because there is a separate and distinct difference between Office of Early Childhood and DCF in terms of how we have to gather information based on children in foster care. The steps taken to have to report those numbers through the Title IV-E has made the situation much more cumbersome. And we are in conversations with Commissioner Bai, who is a tremendous partner, to try to see what elements of the OEC process we can use and still meet the federal mandates and expectations of Care for Kids and Title IV-E to make the expectation of and the experience of the child care providers on the receiving end much easier to navigate. And so you never want the constituents to feel as though the state agencies are not being responsive. And what I heard in the providers that were testifying earlier in the week is that they had started to lose confidence that DCF really appreciated the ability to have them take children that had been placed in foster care on really a moment's notice, and how that impacted them. So, I appreciate the question about childcare, to be able to say that publicly to the providers who have been negatively impacted by the two different systems, but I'd like Melanie Sparks to talk about just what our system is and to give you an example of how that differs from the OEC system a little bit.
And Melody, and I
Melanie.
apologize, I don't see you currently. There you are. Melanie, hi. When you're talking about that, just for my colleague, can you explain that this is state dollars in the budget under DCF and why we have those dollars there? What separates them from the OEC Care for Kids dollars, so that my colleagues understand why we have a line item in your budget?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Representative Abercrombie and the committee. So daycare is daycare. I'm actually excited to talk to you about daycare and the things that we're trying to do to be responsive to all of the concerns and all of the complaints that we've heard from our daycare network at large. I absolutely echo and feel everything that my commissioner said. Our daycare providers are an integral, critical part of the work we do. They supported us through COVID. They support us every day during normal operations. We could not see the results that we see from our children and our families if we didn't have them. So I echo the commissioner in our apologies for some of our difficulties. I will reiterate our commitment to fixing that, partnering with OEC to making this a more seamless process for our daycare providers. So as Representative Abercrombie said, there is a line item in the OEC budget for the Care for Kids program, and that pays daycare costs or supplemental daycare costs, and that is an important distinction, the supplemental piece, for children across the state. It also pays for supplemental costs of daycare for a subset of the population of the DCF children in care. DCF also has its own line item.
Melanie, can I just ask, what is that line item, please, in the budget so that we all know? Is that child care, community kid care? The line item?
I will defer to
Cindy.
Can I jump in actually? Cindy. Yes.
It's foster care.
It's foster
care.
Okay.
Right, because the only child care that DCF pays, as Representative Abercrombie asked, are children in foster care, which makes the distinction from the overall number of children that OEC pays for. That's the distinction. Our line item is specific to children in foster care.
So in looking at your line items, the only foster I see are board and care for children under foster care. Is that the line item that's in, Cindy?
Yes, it's part of the RAP expenditures that fall under that that line item.
Okay, would you break that down for us for the group that so we know what it is? Okay, thank you.
Yes, we will.
Sorry to interfere, but I saw Lucy's face and everybody else's, and I wanted to save us another round of questions on that one. Thank you. Go ahead.
Not a problem. So as Cindy said, it is not an individual line item in our budget. It is a piece of the foster care line item, and it encompassed about $11.4 million last fiscal year. The importance of DCF being able to fund child care costs as opposed to just OEC is twofold. The first purpose being that we need immediate child care. So the Care for Kids application process is an application process. The foster parent in our case, or even the bio parent for children that are not associated with us, they fill out an application. That application is quite extensive. It takes a while to fill out. It gets sent to OEC. OEC is really, really responsive to making their determinations on those applications, but there is a lag time. In our cases, it can be about 4 months between when that application is started, gets submitted, and then it is quick, the turnaround time once it gets to OEC. But it can be up to four to 5 months. When a child comes into care, we need the ability to place that child in daycare immediately, as in the next day. So the purpose of the DCF funding for child care when a child comes into care is the ability to pay that gap period. So the child comes into care, By the next day, 2 days at the absolute latest, between the social worker and the foster parent, we've identified a daycare for that child. We've placed that child, and we immediately start paying for that child. We pay 100% of the daycare cost for the duration that that child is in daycare. We pay it before the Care for Kids application determination is made. So it's that gap period that is so important to our ability to be able to continue to fund these services. Once the Care for Kids payment kicks in, once that application is approved, at that point, that's where we start getting a little tricky. And that's where we have a lot of work to do with OAC, who has been fantastic about working through this with us. We are getting invoices from the daycare provider for our child. That invoice is for 100% of the cost of the daycare, which we're paying. When the Care for Kids portion kicks in, the daycare provider gets that Care for Kids payment, then has to figure out the cost that they were billing DCF, subtract the Care for Kids cost so the state isn't double paying, and DCF continues to fund the difference. The Care for Kids payment is not, for our population, is almost never the full cost of the daycare. DCF is committed to ensuring that we're paying the daycares for 100% of that cost. So we have to then back ourselves into what Care for Kids paid, what the total cost of the payment is, and then what we're obligated to pay moving forward. Obviously, with two different state agencies and two very different systems, they don't generally talk very well to one another behind the scenes. So we are manually looking at a Care for Kids report, and just to give you an idea of our numbers, 13,000 invoices last fiscal year for daycare, and we're matching those up every single month. From the daycare provider's perspective, you can imagine how difficult that is as well. And it's an added layer, and I think you heard some testimony about it the other day, it's an added layer for our daycare providers that they don't have to do with me walking in every week with my child and dropping off to them. So that does feel a little bit different to them. That's extra work for them. It's extra work for us as well. But it's so important that we do that, because if we don't, the state is essentially not fully double paying for the cost of the daycare, but at least partially double paying for the cost of the daycare. So those are some of the things that we're trying to work out with OAC, and using their system, which we have heard numerous times from providers is easier to navigate than ours. Using their system and standing that up, that's where we are with OAC right now.
Yeah, so you have two issues going on here. One, you have an issue with the paperwork. It's very cumbersome compared to Care for Kids, which is surprising to hear, because you do hear from parents that the Care for Kids process is cumbersome, but these particular providers are saying it's even more cumbersome through DCF. But then you also have an issue of delayed payments, which is kind of surprising. So is the delayed payments, related to the paperwork, the cumbersome part of the paperwork, do you think? Is that why there's such a delay in it?
So, Representative, I have spent numerous hours over the last year looking and analyzing at those 13,000 payments that I was talking about to get underneath that. And yes, I do think that part of it is the paperwork piece. I think part of it is that, you know, when our new administration came on, we made a very, very detailed commitment changing the infrastructure of how we pay for our wrap services, our area office-based and ancillary service model. We have dedicated 6 grants and contract specialists. We have dedicated 6 new financial clerks to overseeing that process, which is about 90,000 payments a year. So outside of daycare in general, which is where that comes from, we've made a very concerted effort to get underneath our payment delays, because we understand that we're impacting the service availability for our children. Aside from the fact that it's just not good business to not pay for the services that you use. We have an obligation to these providers.
I agree.
I as well. We have an obligation
Yeah.
to providers.
Yeah, thank you for that. I think it's important for my colleagues to hear what the process is. People don't always understand why we have budgeted amount for daycare in your line item. So I wanted to, just for educational purposes. So 2 things for the work group, and then I will yield my time. Rachel, I would like to know what the lapses were for DCF in 2021. DCF, I'd like to know how you used any of those lapses, if you put them back into any of the services. Reason why I'm asking is providers, therapeutic group homes have huge deficits, 230,000. Why are we not supporting these group homes when we have lapsed dollars? That's number 1. Number 2 is you developed a new transportation system, so that an in-house transportation, which we put a lot of money in, millions of dollars in. I'd like to know where that is. I don't see it in the budget at all. So I'd like to know where we are with that going forward. And then thirdly, we had a lot of kids that were born through COVID. You know, where do you see the biggest need right now in our infants and toddlers? And what have you seen through COVID? What have you learned? And that could all be for the work group. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Representative. I'm going to jump off in a minute and hand over to my co-chair, but I just want to say, I know that one thing that we did not talk about, and I want to hear about in the subcommittee, I want to know about your billing system and your IT system that you have in DCF. I want to understand how you do your billing system. I see a lot of supposed upgrades going on in different other agencies, and the agencies that work directly with the public, like the daycares and the foster parents and everything like that, they should have the number 1 IT system going on, because that system helps to simplify the process of them either getting reimbursed or getting paid. And our public needs it desperately, because these are small businesses also. So I really want to we can have a whole separate conversation about it, Cindy. We can do whatever you want, but we need to hear what you need as an agency on improving, so that even in reimbursement circumstances and downsizing those applications so that it's a lot simpler, I think would be a home run for DCF in working with the people and the providers out there. So Senator Austin, it's all yours.
All set, Tony? Okay, up next is Representative Dathan.
Thank you very much, both chairs. Just wanted to come back again. Thank you, Rep. Abercrombie, for asking my question on the lapses. That's a concern I had as well. Can we discuss your staffing? I know, wanted to find out and get a better understanding about how many filled positions and how many vacant positions that you all have. Again, please feel free to bring us the working group if you don't have it to hand. And really wanted to get an understanding of from you, with the move of 39 people for the human resource function, how your agency is moving. I see, DCF is a very high touch, relationship based group with a lot of nuances in the types of employees that you have that are so much different than maybe other agencies and other state employees might offer. And I'm wondering, has this move had an implication on your group in terms of how you are, because I know that there's a lot of timekeeping and a lot of sort of nuanced HR functions within your organizations that other agencies don't. So I'd like to get an understanding about that. You want to answer those questions?
Yes, Representative, thank you very much. I didn't know if you had a third point to that, but those two are meaty issues. So I want to make sure that you have a response, at least a brief one before we get to the working group. But so I will tee up Deputy Commissioner Jody Hill-Lilly to speak specifically about the impact of HR centralization on DCF. But I will have the CFO speak to the caseload trends that you asked about. And I also would direct the committee's attention to the chart that we offered as part of our written testimony, and just a hair of an explanation on that to kind of orient you to what these numbers actually mean. If you see the chart that has been submitted under the section entitled Caseload Trends, I want to make sure that we make the distinction that that largest part of the bar graph talks about the total calls to our call center. And so people call into our care line for various reasons, and those are not all abuse and neglect reports. The second column is the abuse and neglect reports that have come in, and you definitely see what those that trend has looked like from 2016, and of course the one most impacted by the pandemic in 2020. And then the third line would be the of those calls that are reports which are screened in for either an investigation or a family assessment response. And so our caseload trends are a direct correlation or a direct result of the call volume. And so, if you will, the front door, as well as our permanency numbers of being able to move the back end and moving kids out of our system, some of which was impacted by reduced court capacity over the COVID time period. So I wanted to contextually talk about that before I kick it to Cindy to give you the numbers associated with our caseloads.
Hi, I believe you asked for our position count number. We right now have a authorized count of 3,021 positions. We are reducing that count in this budget by 97. That's 50 related to the quality parenting centers, 8 at Solnet North, and then the HR transferred to the Department of Administrative Services. That brings us to 2924 for this upcoming fiscal year if this budget is approved. Right now we have 2,817 filled positions, and we have 93 vacant positions that we are working on filling. That gives us between the two of 2,910, which brings us just below the authorized count that we're looking at for next year of 2,924. And our case is at 66% for our social workers, 66.14, just because I'm a fiscal person and I have to say that, percent. And we are, the caseload is rather low right now. So, you know, this is normally a peak period. When you look at caseload, the caseload is extremely cyclical and is very closely pegged to school year. We see increases in March, May, and October each year.
Yes, okay, great. One of my questions actually, and thank you, Commissioner, for bringing up that chart. My second question really is, with the pandemic, I understand that there's less. Is it mostly due to, you know, teachers not being able to report, or other third parties that normally would see the children during the pandemic that is causing less of a caseload? And what has the agency done to address that issue?
Thank you very much for that, Representative Dathan, because we have worked very closely with the Connecticut State Department of Education related to that. Jurisdictions across the country had that concern because typically educators make up 40% of the call volume. But I want to make sure that the committee hears also that of that 40%, less than 5% are substantiated. So when we think about the reduction in call volume specifically from educators, it gave us an opportunity to conduct joint webinars with the then commissioner of the State Department of Ed that can be found on the DCF website as well as the CSDE website, as well as targeted conversations with school districts about other ways to engage students and understand attendance concerns, understand what it is that teachers may need or educators educators may need in order to meet the needs of their students. So when you think about that 40% reduction in calls, what does that mean in terms of how educators are prepared to know what's available in their communities? So one of the things you will see in our written testimony is a pilot of prevention services unit, where we take the capacity that we have in our caseloads to offer to a specific school district. We picked one that the Office of the Child Advocate had made some concerns about 911 calls, to say, if we infuse some of our social workers on the ground with educators to help connect them to community-based services, will that ultimately have a positive effect on connecting families to services further upstream in this prevention continuum? It wasn't this, oh no, 40% of the calls aren't coming in, the sky is falling, because again, only 5% of those get substantiated. But what about those other needs of kids and families that educators sometimes find their hands tied of not knowing what to do or how to help students to, be successful in the classroom by addressing what's happening with their families? So we think the combination of looking at our call volume plus our caseload trends, plus our prevention services will give us an opportunity to partner differently with the Department of Education to really ramp up the needs of connecting families to their services within their communities. But again, because this is something that we want to see happen and be successful, starting small with a small district that we know has high volume to us and calls to 911 to be able to address the behavioral health concerns and some of the other issues that we've talked about here today. So we can talk further about our caseload trends and our position counts in the working group, but we wanted to give you those basic numbers to have you think about how we are organizing all of this along our continuum.
All set, Representative? You're muted, Representative Datham.
You're right. I asked 2 questions. I will hold my next question if there's time.
We're already over the time now, but
I will do it in writing. Thank you, Senator.
Okay, that would be great.
Thank you.
Representative Nolan.
Hello again. I'm glad that Representative Walker asked the question about technology, because that was one of my other questions that I had in regards to the capacity or the ability for DCF to do things in present time versus old time. So I'd be interested in knowing what you would need to update your system and bring you to the normalcy of today with what IT is necessary for you to do that in regards to that. And another question was earlier, I don't know if you would answer this or maybe Melanie would come back and answer it, in regards to the application process for childcare is lengthy, y'all know. And I'm just trying to find out, is there any work into streamlining that or making that a little bit less lengthy so that it just doesn't take so much time for people to get a response and or to have to fill out or have to deal with that lengthy period of time that it takes?
So the Care for Kids, I'll answer those in reverse order. The Care for Kids application is not a DCF application. It is, I believe it's a federal application that is effectuated through OEC. So it's kind of taking that through us to OEC. And so now you can see where the providers, it's super cumbersome. In order for us to get the 4E reimbursement, it's associated with a child and a slot, whereas OEC doesn't have that component, which further complicates things for the provider on the other end. So we can, achieve the reimbursement because it's in that foster care line item. So you have to kind of add that layer to it. So we don't control the Care for Kids application per se. And then the other question about IT, this gives me just a bit of if I may, to be able to brag a little bit about my department and how humbled I am to be able to say that as everybody pivoted to the virtual environment, we were still able to conduct our mission critical work because we have had mobility. We have had technology in terms of our tablets and mobile telephones to be able to connect with families, to triage cases to determine which still required a pandemic response. My workers, my gosh, you know, the Solnits had people still working 24/7. My care line had people working 24/7. My everyday average social workers pivoted to the virtual environment. And those of you who know that we have been in this 30-year consent decree, our court monitor has been monitoring the quality of our casework during this time, making adjustments for the pandemic that has just turned our lives upside down, and has seen some tremendously good social work that's still happening to try to help families navigate this and keep children safe. Make no mistake, families are stressed, resources are thin, people are impacted by racial unrest as well as economic hardship on top of the COVID-19. We call it an imperfect storm. But in the midst of all, the DCF, as the state's Child Protective Service Agency, met families and communities where they are and really tried to maintain a limited pandemic footprint because of our IT infrastructure and because of being able to pivot quickly to the virtual way. We were even able to, Representative, onboard a group of new social workers virtually because our Academy for Workforce Development created online platforms to be able to give them some of the same experiences they would have had in person. So I'm really proud of the way the department has really recognized the importance of our mission critical work while balancing their own health and safety needs. So we can talk more in the working group about IT in general and about our systems and all of those things that are on the public facing side of things. But then I would be remiss if I didn't talk about the impact of COVID on my workforce and how proud I am of them.
Well, I appreciate you bringing that up because I know in my nighttime job in law enforcement, I have a great deal of interaction with a lot of your care line personnel, and I commend them and you for being able to do the job that you do in this critical time that we're having. And I really, really, really hope that you can express that, and perhaps I'll send you a letter and expressing that, because I think that it's necessary to let them know how great we appreciate what they're doing, because sometimes we tend to get sidelined to show that appreciation, especially in my career. So I just want to thank you so much and share that publicly.
Appreciate that. Thank you, Representative.
Thank you, Representative Nolan. Representative Curry, nice to see you.
Good to see you as well. Thank you, Madam Chair. Commissioner, always great to see you. And no question, just a quick comment just on the conversation that you had previously with Representative Dathan. I'm glad the conversation around the strengthening of DCF and the State Department of Education's relationship. And I know this is something that you and I have talked about and your staff and I have worked on over the last couple of years. And it's really great to hear that those steps moving forward and how you proactively have kind of helped to resolve a number of the issues that these districts have had. So thank you for your continued efforts around that and all that you do.
Thank you, Representative Curry. It's great to see you. Thank you very much.
This was in the budget.
I see no more questions, Commissioner. I think that I thank you for all your answers. You're always detail oriented. It makes it easy for us to understand what's going on. We look forward to seeing you at the working group. And I apologize for all the noise. I'm on another Zoom at the same time. And so again, we'll see you on the working group. Is Madam Administrator on?
Window where they can't be cut out.
I know she's got to be on.
And the person, can just do.
Well, we'll be done for the morning, but we will come back at 1 o'clock for the Department of Aging and at 1:30 for the Department of Social Services. And those will complete our Human Services State Agency presenters. So you don't need to sign out. We'll just be recessing until 1 o'clock. Enjoy lunch. You don't often get time to eat or even go to the bathroom, but here we are. We're going to take a little bit of time for that. Talk to you all soon.
Thank you, Senator Austin. Thank you to the Appropriations team and committee for your indulgence today, and I appreciate your questions. And we look forward to the workshops. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Good day, Commissioner.